All right, welcome back. Another segment of Good Vibes. Debbie Cox DeNova is back. She's been having some very interesting segments. That flirting segment she did last week got a lot of attention. This week we're jumping in. Let's see. Confidence versus cockiness.
Yeah.
In the sports world, we hear that all the time, but how do you differentiate?
That's a great question. And a lot of people are worried that if they're going to work on their confidence, that they might accidentally cross the line from confidence into cockiness, arrogance, narcissism, which is a
Swagger.
huge buzzword, right?
Swagger's good.
A little swagger is okay, and it can be connected to either confidence or cockiness. But we're going to talk about the distinction. So people are either worried that they're going to cross that fine line from confidence to cockiness, or that they'll be perceived by other people as arrogant or narcissistic if they are operating in the world under confidence. And really, they are very, very diametrically opposed experiences. And people can tell, perceptive, we're intuitive enough that we can perceive when there is a level of arrogance or superiority, narcissism, cockiness going on versus true confidence. Because confidence is actually quite quiet, right? Whereas arrogance is sort of a scream, right? And it's a cover up for a level of insecurity at the end of the day, right? So narcissism, for example, and we'll talk about the fact that, first of all, narcissistic personality disorder needs to be evaluated and a license.
That's clinical.
It is the clinical,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So we
okay.
can't just go around diagnosing people with narcissistic personality disorder if we are
They
not
use that on
qualified to
Trump
do
all the
that.
time, but the ones that are using it on him are probably a little bit of that themselves.
Right. And to some degree, a lot of us are demonstrating narcissistic tendencies. There's a lot of selfies going on, right? And the thing about intellectual arrogance in our day and time is that it's so easy to go onto Google and, have confirmation bias or prejudice bias. Just by searching up, you can find pockets of people who will agree with you somewhere out there. And so it has us having this experience of, well, I'm always right, like a know-it-all experience. We have to be very careful for sure. But at the end of the day, what is underlying true confidence is humility and the ability to self-evaluate. So it's quiet confidence really understands that there's always room to grow. And in order to be to be able to admit that you have room to grow, you have to be humble to some degree, and you have to be willing to evaluate your performance in the real world. So confidence is actually rooted in reality, whereas arrogance and cockiness is not. It's sort of this overinflated experience, right? Egocentric, all centered around me, and it needs other people to corroborate that experience in order to keep it alive.
So arrogance might mean, really, when you break it down, a lack of confidence.
Absolutely. So it's a lot of times rooted in most of the time rooted in insecurity, deep insecurity, and a fear-based place. And because people who are hyper arrogant or narcissistic or cocky don't have the ability to evaluate their inner world the way someone who is confident does.
Right.
Typically, someone who is confident is living by their values. They're living from a place of integrity, right? But because someone who is living in an arrogant way doesn't have the ability to really, or the unwillingness to look at their inner world, they then are left with the outer world. So really making sure that they look a certain way, that their impressions, because they're evaluating their own self-worth according to their impressions in the world, they need people to give them sort of support and praise for the way that they look, the way that they think, the way that they perform in the world. So they're always sort of, going out there. And yes, there are some similarities and crossovers. So, people who are confident and people who are arrogant, they typically are outgoing, right? And they appear as though they like each other. They're good, like themselves, that they're good leaders. But underneath it all, if you are actually operating from a place of developing confidence, there is no risk of you actually going over into cockiness because they are completely different.
But in the way they handle it, like I watched Drew Brees all these years. He was as confident as you get.
Yeah.
He had a little swagger to him. But when he did his press conference, a lot of humility.
Yeah.
He didn't get up there and have his hat on a certain way, and he didn't take the swagger to the podium.
Right.
He left it off the podium.
Yes.
That says a lot, doesn't it?
It does. And confidence leaves clues. And it's also something that acknowledges the collaboration and the help and the teamwork of other people. Whereas someone who is arrogant is more reluctant to share the spotlight or to give credit where credit is due. For the people who have helped them to get where they're going. It's all about me, right? And so because they're in a competitive mindset, they are always feeling like they have to be superior in order to maintain their value. And that's why they are reluctant to give other people credit, because in their own minds, it gives them an experience of lowering of self-value. And so and dropping from that superior place to an inferior place. True confidence knows that like it's not, you're not in competition truly with anyone else. Like it's really about showing up in your best, operating according to your values, doing your best, and always coming from a place of self-improvement. But we all have to watch, because we're all prone to something called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is this illusory sense. Say
that again.
The Dunning-Kruger effect. Okay. So this is this illusory sense of superiority. And there are over 100 studies that show that we are all, we could all accidentally evaluate ourselves as more capable, more confident, more intellectually superior, even though mathematically speaking, it just isn't true.
As long as it's not the Freddy Krueger effect. You got these great A athletes, Dion Sanders, other people, they walk on the field. You sense you can't beat them because they're so confident. But they've been beat a few times.
Yeah.
Not many.
Right.
So when they get beat on a deep pass, or they miss a tackle, what does it do to a person like that that thinks that he is never going to make a mistake?
Right. Okay. So that's a great question. So someone who is operating out of narcissism or arrogance or cockiness is going to feel deflated by their losses, super deflated, and like their worth has been lowered. And it'll oftentimes trigger a very emotional reaction out of them, anger, some sort of explosive experience. Whereas someone who is confident understands that hits and misses are a part of life. And so they evaluate their performance accordingly so that they can improve their performance going forward. Now, what we were talking about before the break is the Dunning-Kruger effect. And by the way, Dunning and Kruger are the researchers that came up with this effect. When they found in a number of research studies, for example, 2 software engineer companies were evaluated, and they found that at one company 34% and the other 32%, and the other company 42% of the software engineers there evaluated themselves as in the top 5%. In another study of American drivers, 88% of American drivers judged their driving skills at above average, right? There was another one with a college debate, had a college debate tournament, and those who were in the lower 25% and who were losing at an average of about 4 out of 5 debates in the preliminary rounds actually evaluated themselves as winning about 60% of the time. And part of the reason is because without a good grasp of the knowledge of the skills of what creates a good debate, they were not able to evaluate when and how their arguments were breaking down, right? And so that's what happens. Now, the Dunning-Kruger effect can go in the opposite direction too, because what they found is that people who are experts at what they do, they are actually more than likely going to evaluate other people as expert or at the same level of expertise as they are. So they don't actually see themselves as special as they are. So evaluating your performance according to reality is very important, both on the positive and the negative side, in order to perform better, right?
Let me ask you this. What happens if, like, Meryl Streep is an average actress, but all of a sudden she has a great role, she does well, she wins an Academy Award? Does that catapult her into another arena where she thinks, now I can't do any wrong? It takes a lot of control to stay humble, doesn't it?
Yeah,
at that point?
You can go to a place of overinflation and then start to tell yourself grandiose stories. But typically, if you're someone who operates according to your own value system, and this is really important, because someone who is confident knows, likes, and respects themselves. And by knowing yourself, you need to know what are your core values. And in order to know those core values and to respect yourself, you need to be operating according to those values. So oftentimes when you meet someone with true confidence, they have a really good, code of ethics, morals by which they operate. So if they fly off, if they have a win and it creates a little bit of grandiosity, they'll oftentimes course correct back to their value systems, and that's what will keep them in check. And again, it'll leave clues. So
I remember Joe Montana when he threw that pass in a playoff game and Dwight Clark went about 12 feet to grab it. After that, Joe Montana had a great career where he could do no wrong. It boosted his confidence.
Yeah.
But if Dwight Clark would have dropped the ball, it could have been a different thing. So years later, when I had a chance to interview him and everybody said, wonder why he doesn't wear Super Bowl rings? He has 4. I said, because everybody knows he has 4.
Yeah.
He doesn't really have to show off, does he?
He's not trying to prove anything,
Right.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're someone who is concerned about about operating according to confidence and not moving over into cockiness, because when someone's really winning, if they're actually someone who wins in life, then they can actually show up in a way that would be cocky for someone else, right? But it's really rooted in confidence because it's according to their own competence in life. So one of the first things to do is to ask for feedback from people about your performance, and then be willing to accept that feedback and change your behavior no matter how uncomfortable it is. So if you're someone who wins a lot, then this takes a level of humility to be able to say, well, where am I not winning? How am I showing up in a way that is not actually according to my values? And then to hear people's feedback and put it into practice in your own life. This is both in the positive and the negative. Like, where are you winning and doing well, so you can understand that, but also where are you not showing up as competently? And then the other thing is to keep learning. So the more that you learn, the more that you fill those holes in your competence, right? And so you're less likely to fall prey to the Dunning-Kruger effect. So if you, there's an old saying, and I hope I don't mess it up, but if you're arguing with a fool, make sure that the other man is not also doing the same, right? So you want to make sure that you are someone who is constantly have a learning bucket list, is what one researcher suggests, because you always want to be filling in and actually improving your relationship with yourself, putting yourself into areas that will help you to grow in life, and understanding that in order to grow, that means that you have to be able to willing to look at the places where you're not doing that well.
That's a great topic. You're going to be joining us on Sports on the Bayou, too, for your good vibes. And we're going to have, I think your first topic, you're going to talk about how does the alpha male take over the locker room when there's another alpha male who wants the locker room.
Yeah.
That's going to be interesting.
Yes.
All you athletes need to get ready. This is going to be good stuff. Great topic.
Thank you.
What are we talking about next week? Do we know?
Don't even know yet.
All right. All right, there you have it. Good vibes. We're going to see you next week right here. Same place, same time, right here on HTV.